Hello again, indie authors. Welcome back to Sid Nickel Publications. Dialogue. Today's video covers the subject of writing great dialogue. And in my opinion, there's three really important reasons. If you think about dialogue from the beginning point of your book, the main thing it can do is fully develop your characters. And when you fully develop your characters, people can relate to them. They become attached to your characters. And if the dialogue is very strong, early on they begin to have an understanding of who your characters are and what they're about. It can replace some of the world building, some of the exhibition, that detail that we can sometimes get caught up in through dialogue. It can help that character establish who they are in your story. Think about dialogue this way. Dialogue is how people speak. And you know this as well as I do know this. Think of people in your own life. Through dialogue, through the words that are spoken, you identify friends, family, business associates, maybe just people in social settings that you come upon every so often. You know them. Some are loud. Some are Seinfeld-ish close talkers. Some of them are very quiet and you have to pay close attention to them. Others are just profane and you know it's coming. That's just the way people talk. If you write with the idea that you're going to demonstrate a conversation, it can really help give your book and your characters a very natural feel. So point one to me is developing your characters through their style and your style of writing their dialogue. Now let's look at point number two, and I have these three here. And the second point is dialogue can impact the overall pacing of your story. And we touched on that a little bit in point one. When you're writing great dialogue, you can, as I said, eliminate some of the detail work in your writing. Coming off a big action event, the thing that boosts up the energy or the pace of your book. And when that action is over and you come back and you want to maintain that elevated pacing, because you know that if you have a dip in your pacing, people can get bored and they can leave your book. Dialogue is one of those things that can help you maintain that high level, that really good standard of book pacing. Your characters can speak to each other coming off events that maintain that certain level of activity and can keep the interest level very high. You can have certain characters, conversations, move the story forward, even explain the plot, give tips, give a little bit of insight into what's coming. Those things are very, very important because you're going to write what people are actually doing, thinking, and then saying. So your dialogue, even though it just sometimes feels very unnatural, is critical to those two things, character development and sometimes adding to the pacing of your book. Now let me give you a real world example. In my second book, which is right here, Who Killed Glenna? The first book was more of an altered memoir. That's a backwards glance we spoke of many times. But in Who Killed Glenna, I sent that manuscript off to my professional editor. And she immediately called me and she goes, people don't talk like that. People don't speak in proper English. They don't use the right breaks in their sentences. They don't speak with periods and commas and exclamation points. You have to start writing dialogue as people speak. It was an eye-opener because I went back and I read what I had written for dialogue in most every case in the entire book. And I was cleaning it up way too much. It wasn't natural. I had killed the flow of my characters' conversations by making the writing, proper speaking to fit that writing standard that I thought needed to be there. I spent quite a bit of time going back and examining the entire book and changing the dialogue making the dialogue really fit. There were ain'ts, can'ts. There were different levels of changes. There were sentences that just really didn't make any sense because that's how sometimes we all speak. We're not very clear sometimes. We get excited. We get angry. We get maybe a little bit ticked off and depressed at times about things, and our dialogue reflects our emotions. So those little tips can help you from the beginning. Don't do what I did and write that boring, bland, proper English dialogue. I really felt very good after understanding that from her. But I was challenged with that thing, he said, or she said, or John said, or Sam said. It began to weigh on my mind. How many times can I say that? And I got more good advice on writing dialogue in those areas. And that advice was simply this. Sometimes you have to write those things. And you should just write them because the reader isn't going to mind. Now, like everything else in writing a book, if something is out of place and excessive and overdone, your reader's going to pick up on it immediately, and they're not going to like it. You have to find a way to strike the balance with identifying the character, who's speaking. One of the things that I think is really hard is to have an exchange of characters without too many names and identifiers of who's speaking. And you just have to experiment with it. Write it. Just sit down and free write it. Try to write it in a way that if it makes sense to you as you write it, and you can come back later on and read it and not sense any confusion, maybe on the reader's part, then you're writing a really good dialogue. It has to have a very good flow. And if you identify your character's voice clearly, a lot of times the reader will pick up on who's speaking just through their tone, just through their methods, their slang, or the way they use their words. That's what dialogue really is. Now, the third thing about dialogue is this. Point number 3 is very important because your dialogue writing has to build relationships between your characters. Those points of conversation tie your main characters, your secondary characters, and certainly your villains to your main character. Those exchanges have to be definitive. They have to really be well established. So once again, your reader doesn't have to guess who's speaking and doesn't sit there and say, I don't think that's how that conversation would have gone. I probably rewrite dialogue as much as I rewrite anything in the entire book because I want the character's voice to have the right balance and to strike the right emotion for the setting that they're in. So never give up the opportunity to let your dialogue build those relationships and tie your characters together in the right way. Dialogue. It's easy to talk about it. It's really easy to think it out. But if you're like me, when you sit down and you start typing on your computer and you're writing that manuscript and you reread it, sometimes it feels very awkward. Sometimes it feels out of place. That's when you have to sit down and focus. That's when you have to do your edit and rewrite and revision over and over until you know you've struck the right balance between your characters. You've got their voices identified and placed in the right voice so that the story actually makes sense. Dialogue is critically important. It's one of those things that move our book along from the very beginning to the very end. And don't forget about the dialogue that goes on when you write it from the characters' own conversations with themselves. In this book that we are writing together in our 10 video series, A Civil War Fictional Story, book 1 of 2, the primary character, Joshua Truscott, has a lot of conversations with his brother who's also in his unit. He has conversations with multiple soldiers and multiple officers and multiple people along the way. but probably as much conversation with anyone he has with himself. He talks to himself and asks himself questions and tries to make sure that he is thinking things through. So I try to identify that character as a planner, a little bit of a plotter. He is driven by organization. He is driven by trying to make sure things are right. Then the switch is flipped and he is driven by action. When he finishes his planning, when he finishes his review, it's pure action. His orders, his conversations, and his reviews are from a officer level to subordinates. And his voice is firm, and his voice is secure, and his voice is definitive. That's it. This is what we're doing. That's how I'm trying to write that character. And if you see where I'm going with that, it can establish the leadership roles with not only a primary character, it can also establish a cut above level with certain secondary characters over other characters in your book. Dialogue has an awful lot of reach within your book. It's a tool, and it's a tool that you can use to write a great manuscript. And after you get through with your edit, your rewrite, and your revision, and you're 100% sure you've done that to the very best of your ability, you can go out and 100% confidently say to people, this is a good book. It's well written, it's well edited, it's got a great cover, and it's a great value to you. In my mind, that's what the entire essence of a great self-published book has to be. And what it translates to is work, hard work. A lot of people think writing is just big money and exciting and all sorts of, easy things to do. You all know, as I know, it's exactly the opposite of that. It's solitary work. It's busy work at times, and it's repetitive. And you just have to fight your way through the tough spots. And hopefully when you do all those things, all that hard work gets done, you've got a great story. Well, we are working diligently on writing and getting the body of that book I just mentioned. Dying for Dixie is the title of our Civil War fictional novel. I would say in another 2 weeks, we'll probably be able to come back and give a updated video on our 10 video series, kind of catch everyone up on the book that we're writing together. And I hope you will continue to send me questions and comments and participate in that conversation. I hope our writing community can continue to work together to make this book work out real well. But until we get together next week for probably another video outside that process of the Civil War fictional book, I want you all to take care of yourselves. Go out next week, have some fun with your friends and family. You know it's important. But more than anything, take care of yourself. And we will hopefully have you come back and join us next week, probably next Tuesday, for another video here on writing for indie authors at Sid Bickle Publications. Till then, take care. See you soon. Bye-bye. Okay, Joshua Truscott. Oh, Truscott returns. He had hoped Beach would be in the... Josh turned away saying, that's fine, Leighton. Plenty of fights coming soon. Okay, got it. I'm all right with that.